You think you know everything about American sports cars? Oh yeah, Mustang, Camaro, Corvette, the holy trinity of muscle and speed, right? Everybody talks about them. They get the love, the posters on the wall, the Hollywood action scenes. But what if I told you that there were American sports cars that nobody remembers? Cars that were supposed to be the next big thing, but instead they vanished into the depths of automotive history, buried under the weight of bad decisions, corporate failures, and just plain bad luck. We're not talking about some random concept cars that never saw production. No, these were real, tangible machines. Cars that had engines, test miles, prototypes, and in some cases even full production runs. Yet they still disappeared into obscurity. They weren't just forgotten. It's like they were erased from existence. No fan clubs, no nostalgia-filled YouTube documentaries, just a few grainy images and old brochures floating around on the internet. How does that even happen? How do you go from designing a car meant to rival Ferrari to becoming a footnote in history? Maybe it was bad timing. Maybe it was terrible marketing. Or maybe these cars were just too ahead of their time, too ambitious, too different. And we all know what happens to things that break the mold. They either become icons or they get buried. And unfortunately, these cars got buried. Picture this. It's the 1980s. The world is obsessed with excess, big hair, big movies, big money, and of course, big cars. Lamborghini is dropping jaws with the Countach. Ferrari is flexing its muscles with the Testarossa, and Porsche is refining its engineering masterpieces. Meanwhile, in America, a group of engineers and dreamers are working on something radical. A car that doesn't just follow the muscle car formula, but instead challenges European exotics on their own turf. A sleek, futuristic supercar with cutting-edge aerodynamics and absurd horsepower numbers. It rolls onto the scene, makes headlines for a brief moment, and then vanishes. Or let's go back even further, the 1970s. The golden age of muscle cars is dying out. Fuel crises are crippling the industry, and regulations are suffocating performance. But in the middle of all this, a small team is working on an American mid-engine sports car that could have rewritten history. A direct competitor to Ferrari's finest, designed with European flair but built with American muscle. It had the power, the looks, the handling, everything it needed to be great. And yet, only a handful were ever made before the project crumbled under the weight of reality. And it didn't stop there. Over the decades, again and again, American automakers, or ambitious entrepreneurs, attempted to break the mold and create something that would shake up the sports car world. Some of these cars actually made it to production. Some were just a few prototypes away from changing everything. And yet, none of them became household names. None of them became legends. Instead, they became ghosts, whispers of what could have been. And here's the craziest part. Most people don't even know they existed. It's like they were wiped from history, forgotten even by the companies that built them. No nostalgia, no cult following, just a handful of die-hard fans who still remember what could have been. But not today. Today, we're bringing them back. We're diving deep into the forgotten world of American sports cars that should have been legends, but instead became ghosts. Buckle up, because this is going to be a ride you won't forget. In the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s, America tried to prove that it could make more than just gas-guzzling muscle cars. Somewhere in that time, machines were born that could have changed the game. American Ferrari killers that nobody noticed. And no, we're not talking about Dodge Viper or anything from Shelby. These were the Vector W8, AMC AMX3, Devon GTX, Mosler MT900, and even the Panoz Esperante. These beasts were, well, let's just say they were doomed from the start. Let's start with the Vector W8. This thing looked like it was designed for a sci-fi movie. All sharp angles, aggressive aerodynamics, and a cockpit straight out of a fighter jet. It was powered by a twin-turbo 6.0 LV8 that pumped out an insane 625 horsepower. That was in the early 90s. To put that into perspective, a Ferrari F40, the most legendary supercar of that era, had 471 horsepower. The W8 was ridiculously fast, with a claimed top speed of over 200 miles per hour. It should have been America's answer to Lamborghini and Ferrari, but here's the problem. It was also ridiculously expensive and incredibly unreliable. Only 17 were ever built before the company collapsed. Then there was the AMC AMX3. If you ever wanted to see an American car that looked like it was born in Italy, this was it. Designed in collaboration with legendary Italian coach builders, the AMX3 was supposed to be AMC's mid-engine supercar, taking on Ferrari and Lamborghini at their own game. It had a 340 horsepower V8, a sleek, exotic shape, and performance numbers that were absolutely mind-blowing for 1970. But just as production was getting ready to start, AMC pulled the plug. Only 5 were built. 5. That's it. And today it's nothing more than a forgotten relic of what could have been. And let's not forget Devon GTX, the car that was supposed to take the Dodge Viper to the next level. It had a 650 horsepower V10, a lightweight carbon fiber body, and an aggressive design that made it look like a predator ready to pounce. It was track-focused, raw, and absolutely stunning. But there was just one issue. Dodge stopped making the Viper chassis it was based on, killing the Devon GTX before it even had a chance. The Mosler MT900 is another name that deserves more recognition. This was a full-blown race car for the streets, with a carbon fiber monocoque chassis and a Corvette-derived V8. It was insanely light, blisteringly fast, and had handling that could embarrass European exotics. But because it came from a small, independent company, it never got the recognition it deserved. And finally, the Panos Esperante, an American-built sports car that tried to blend old-school muscle with modern performance. It wasn't the fastest or the most powerful, but it had character. It was handmade, different, and completely underappreciated. All of these cars had potential. All of them could have changed the way we see American sports cars. But for one reason or another, they were left behind. In the next part, we'll dive even deeper into what happened and why these incredible machines never got the recognition they deserved. So what happened? Why did these cars fail? Why didn't they become the household names that they deserve to be? Well, let's be real. America is great at building muscle cars, but true high-performance sports cars? That's another story. The U.S. auto industry has always been focused on mass production, big profits, and safe bets, building a limited-run, high-performance, exotic sports car. That's risky business, and in most cases, it just wasn't profitable enough. Take the Vector W8, for example. It was groundbreaking, futuristic, and incredibly powerful. But it was also plagued by quality issues, an astronomical price tag, and a company that couldn't stay afloat. When you charge Ferrari money, people expect Ferrari quality, and Vector just couldn't deliver. It didn't help that founder Jerry Wiegert was at war with investors and the company constantly ran into financial disasters. The result? Vector went from being America's hypercar hope to nothing more than an obscure trivia answer. Then there's the AMC AMX3. It wasn't bad timing that killed it. It was corporate fear. AMC was struggling financially, and instead of taking a gamble on something revolutionary, they played it safe and pulled the plug. The AMX3 had been rigorously tested on European tracks and had proven itself as a real contender against the best Ferrari and Lamborghini had to offer. But in a cruel twist of fate, production costs soared, and AMC simply didn't have the deep pockets to push forward. The dream died before it could truly live. Who knows? If they had taken the risk, maybe we'd be talking about AMX/3S today in the same breath as the Ford GT. And let's not forget Devon GTX, a car that could have been a monster on the track but was killed before it even got a chance. It wasn't the car's fault, it was just unlucky. Dodge decided to discontinue the Viper, and without that foundation, Devon didn't stand a chance. Scott Devon had big ambitions, but when your entire business model depends on a car that no longer exists, you're fighting a losing battle. Despite breaking lap records at Laguna Seca, the GTX disappeared into history, a victim of bad timing and corporate restructuring. The Mosler MT900 was another brilliant underdog. This was a full-blown race car for the streets, with a carbon fiber monocoque chassis and a Corvette-derived V8. It was insanely light, blisteringly fast, and had handling that could embarrass European exotics. But because it came from a small, independent company, it never got the recognition it deserved. Mosler built some of the fastest American cars nobody ever heard of. The MT900 was competing with the best from Ferrari and Porsche, but never had the marketing power to get noticed. And finally, the Panos Esperante, an American-built sports car that tried to blend old-school muscle with modern performance. It wasn't the fastest or the most powerful, but it had character. It was handmade, different, and completely underappreciated. Panos was all about making cars that handled like European exotics, but had raw American power. The Esperante was their take on a grand tour, and while it had success in racing, the road-going version was overshadowed by bigger names. Some of these cars failed because they were ahead of their time, others failed because they lacked funding or corporate backing, and some just had the worst luck imaginable. But make no mistake, these cars were not bad. If anything, they were some of the most exciting machines America ever produced. They just never got their moment in the spotlight. In the next part, we'll explore what could have been, how these cars could have changed the game if things had played out just a little differently. All right, now we're talking about a real hidden gem in the American sports car world, the Mosler MT900. I mean, how many of you have ever heard of it? No, seriously, raise your hand if you've even seen one in the wild. Crickets. This car was like the cool, mysterious kid at school who everyone heard about but never actually met. The MT900 wasn't just a car. It was an absolute beast of engineering, a raw statement of power and performance. Built by Mosler Automotive in the early 2000s, the MT900 might as well have been a UFO for all most people knew about it. Let's start with the specs. It had a 5.7L V8 engine, and while that might not sound mind-blowing by today's standards, we're talking about cars with crazy numbers now, the MT900 was so lightweight that it could easily keep up with the big boys in the supercar world. We're talking about a sub-2, 500-pound car, my friend. And with that kind of weight, it didn't need to have a 1,000-horsepower engine to turn heads. It floored the competition with its handling and speed. But here's where it gets crazy. The MT900 was primarily a track car, designed for racing, not just cruising. Yeah, you could have taken it to a nice Sunday drive, but this thing was meant to eat up asphalt in the most hardcore way possible. It made sense, given Mosler's roots in racing and their obsession with creating a track car for the road. They didn't care about luxury or comfort. They cared about speed. And boy, did it deliver. Now here's the twist. Nobody knew about it. That's the beauty of cars like this, isn't it? The Mosler MT900 wasn't being paraded around at every car show or gracing the pages of every car magazine. It was the opposite of flashy, not trying to make a scene. It just existed in its pure, unrelenting form. And let's not forget the sound. Oh my God, the sound of that V8 engine roaring to life was enough to make anyone weak in the knees. I mean, this wasn't some whiny, high-pitched sound. No, this was raw. The kind of growl that made people on the street stop and stare even if they didn't know why. But here's the sad part. Despite its insane performance and impressive design, the Mosler MT900 didn't get the love it deserved. For all the praise it could have gotten, it stayed under the radar, hidden in the shadows of more famous brands. And that's the tragedy of cars like this. They're built to be legends but never get the recognition. But you, my friend, are now in the know. So the next time someone says, "Oh, I've seen that Ferrari or that Lamborghini," just hit them with, "Yeah, but have you ever seen a Mosler MT900?" And just watch their face. Now we're diving into an American legend that doesn't get enough love, the Panos Esperante. Hold up, though. I know what you're thinking. Panos? What the hell is that? Yeah, exactly. Most of you probably have no clue what I'm talking about. But you should, because this car deserves a lot more attention than it gets. Let's break it down. Picture this. It's the early 2000s. America is still basking in the glory of its big-name supercars like the Viper and the Corvette, but the Panos Esperante is like that cool indie band no one knows, but who's quietly putting out masterpieces. Built by Panos Auto Development, a small company with a big heart, the Esperante was meant to change the game. It was supposed to be that underdog that came out of nowhere to kick the crap out of the big guys. And honestly, it did, in its own way. First off, this car wasn't just about power. It was a statement that you didn't need a huge corporate name or a giant marketing budget to create a car that was just pure fun to drive. The Esperante was more than a pretty face. It was all about feeling the road, getting that connection between the driver and the car that so many modern sports cars have lost in their pursuit of perfection. Under the hood, a 4.6 LV8 engine, or sometimes a 5.0 LV8 if you were lucky, and while it didn't have the insane horsepower numbers of some of its rivals, the real magic was in how it handled. It wasn't just about raw speed. It was about the experience, the tight, responsive steering, the way it hugged corners like it had a vendetta against every curve in its path. It was pure joy in every rev. And let's talk about the design for a minute. I mean, it looks good. The body lines are sleek, aggressive, and just so damn American. It was a muscular yet refined design that made you feel like you were driving something special, even though the world around you was still busy drooling over the latest Ferrari. The exterior, the craftsmanship, the attention to detail, it all screamed exclusivity. And when you drove this thing, you felt exclusive, like you were in on some secret that the rest of the car world just didn't get. But the real kicker? It was hand-built. Yes, this thing was made with the kind of care and attention to detail that you just don't see in mass-produced cars. You could tell. Every inch of it felt like it had been crafted by someone who cared, someone who wasn't just out to make a quick buck. Now, let's talk about why this car was so underrated. If you wanted something that screamed, "I'm rich and I want everyone to know," you didn't buy a Panos Esperante. You went for a Lambo or a Ferrari. The Esperante, on the other hand, was for the kind of person who valued driving experience over name brand recognition. It was for the person who didn't want to follow the pack, but carve their own damn road. Unfortunately, because it wasn't a household name, the Esperante never got the fame it deserved. It flew under the radar, quietly racking up respect among those who appreciated the subtleties of great engineering. But that's also what makes it so damn special. The Panos Esperante wasn't out to prove anything to anyone. It just wanted to be the best it could be. And honestly, that's all you can ask from a sports car. And here's the kicker. This car wasn't just some show pony. It raced. The Panos Esperante GT was a serious contender in the American Le Mans series, competing against the likes of Porsche and Ferrari. And yes, it held its own. It wasn't just a pretty face. It had the balls to back up its claims. So the next time you see a flashy Lambo or a Ferrari, just remember that there's a little Panos Esperante out there, quietly proving that you don't need the biggest name or the loudest engine to be a contender. Sometimes, being an underdog is where the real magic happens. Now hold on to your seats because we're about to talk about a car that might just be the most legendary American sports car that almost nobody knows existed, the Vector W8. This, my friends, is the holy grail of forgotten supercars. If you've never heard of it, buckle up because this thing is wild. Let's just hit you with a reality check. The Vector W8 was the car that almost changed everything. Back in the 1980s, when the automotive world was obsessed with flashy Italian supercars and the occasional German engineering masterpiece, Vector, a small car manufacturer based in California, decided to throw their hat into the ring. And by throw their hat, I mean they kicked open the door with a rocket punch. When the W8 hit the scene, it was a full-on alien spaceship. I'm talking about the kind of car that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie rather than a dealership. The design was pure, unadulterated crazy. It looked like it was built to defy gravity, with sharp, angular lines low to the ground and a cockpit that made you feel like you were piloting a fighter jet. The moment you laid eyes on it, you couldn't help but think, why in the world is this not the most famous car on the planet? And then you get to the performance. Oh baby, under the hood, a twin-turbocharged 6.0 LV8 engine that could easily push over 600 horsepower. For a car that was built in the 80s and early 90s, that was unheard of. The thing could hit 0 to 60 in just about 4 seconds flat, way ahead of its time. That was faster than most of the supercars out there, but it wasn't just about speed. It was about precision. This car had aerodynamics that were so advanced for its time, it could cut through the air like a knife. But here's where the tragedy of the Vector W8 kicks in. Despite being an absolute powerhouse in terms of performance and design, this car was doomed from the start. The production numbers were staggeringly low. Only around 17 units were ever made. That's not a typo. 17. When you hear about super rare, limited edition cars, you typically think, oh yeah, there were 100 of those. But no, Vector said, let's make sure nobody even knows this thing exists, and kept it exclusive to the point of near extinction. The problem? Well, Vector wasn't exactly a well-oiled machine. While they had the vision, the engineering, and the ability to build one hell of a car, they didn't have the resources to market it or build a real production line. This wasn't Ferrari or Lamborghini, who had decades of experience, deep pockets, and a global reputation. Vector was a small company trying to make a statement, and in the end, that statement got lost in the noise. But the story doesn't end there. The Vector W8 wasn't just a car. It was a warning to all future American supercar manufacturers. It proved that the U.S. could build cars that were just as fast, just as aggressive, and just as capable as anything coming out of Europe. In fact, it was so advanced that it should have been the blueprint for future American supercars. Instead, it faded into obscurity, leaving behind nothing but a legacy of what could have been. And that, my friends, is where the true magic of the Vector W8 lies. It was the one that got away, the one that was almost there but never made it into the limelight. It wasn't a Ferrari, a Lambo, or a McLaren. It didn't have the brand name recognition, the marketing, or the popularity. But damn, it had everything else. The performance, the style, the heart. It was the American sports car that should have been a legend, but instead, it remains a footnote in automotive history. So the next time you hear someone going on about how Ferrari or Lamborghini defined the supercar world, just remember Vector W8, the forgotten American superhero that was ahead of its time but was tragically lost to history. And maybe, just maybe, the Vector W8 is the perfect metaphor for all those amazing, underrated things that never get the recognition they deserve. Sometimes, the best things in life are the ones that stay hidden, but once you know about them, you can't unsee them. Conclusion: the unseen heroes of the American sports car world. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Well, sometimes the most iconic cars are the ones we never hear about. We're so obsessed with the Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and Porsches of the world that we forget there are these hidden American gems, these unsung legends, that are still worthy of the spotlight. The Mosler MT900, the Panos Esperante, the Vector W8, they each tell a story of ambition, raw engineering, and a refusal to be anything less than extraordinary. Sure, they didn't get the fame or fortune of their European counterparts, but man, they deserve a hell of a lot more recognition than they get. These cars were made to perform, to break the mold, to push boundaries, and in their own way, they did just that. Maybe not on the grand stage, but in the hearts of those who truly know cars. So, next time you're out there watching a car show or cruising the streets, don't just focus on the usual suspects. Look out for the forgotten ones, the underdogs. Because, as we've seen, the best cars aren't always the loudest ones. Sometimes they're the quietest, hidden away in the shadows, waiting to be discovered by those who appreciate the true meaning of automotive excellence. Because after all, isn't it the ones that nobody knows about that have the most to say?